The information shared on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. While we discuss topics related to mental health, well-being, and emotional support, we are not providing therapy or medical services. Always seek the advice of your physician, psychologist, psychiatrist, or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a mental health condition. If you are in crisis, feeling unsafe, or need immediate support, please contact a mental health professional or emergency services in your area. The views expressed by guests and hosts are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of any affiliated organizations or institutions.
Get inspired, get motivated with M.A.Y.A and the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find M.A.Y.A on Twitter and Instagram at M.A.Y.A_Akai. On Facebook at M.A.Y.A Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything M.A.Y.A at MAYAAkai.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to another episode of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Of course, by now, you know, this is the podcast that looks to embrace salient topics that are related to mental wellness from a fresh and forward-thinking perspective. You know me, I'm trying to normalize this conversation with everybody. So the focus of the podcast is to push back that veil of self-doubt and sabotage that plagues so many of us in our lives, to help you to identify the ambitions, but more importantly, how to harness the motivation to help you yield satisfaction and success in your everyday life, not just life. I want every day to mean something, to have value to you. So if you're a first time listener or viewer, welcome. I always just say lightly, buckle up for safety. Not because, you know, it's going to be something too rough, but occasionally it can be a bumpy because you might hear or discover something that you've never heard before. And that's okay because that's what the podcast is all about. Now, of course, if you're a returning listener or viewer, welcome back. You're more than familiar with how we do things here. One of the things I say is this time is dedicated to you. So this 30, 35, 40 minutes, whatever we spend talking to our next guest, you know, grab that space that's private for you. I even encourage people to grab, you know, a pen, paper, jot down some thoughts that you have, because I guarantee you, having, you know, an aha, I never thought of something that way. That's bring a bit more. But as you know, this installment of the Ambition Show. Last week we had on Tamar Blue, who is the founder and CEO of Mental Happy, and it was amazing how her passion and purpose as they intersected, she took that ambition and turned into an app that has a support group for everyone. So if you're looking for a support group and you haven't found something, I'm going to tell you to go check out Mental Happy. Or if you've been looking to start a support group, Mental Happy has all the bells and whistles, things to make it compliant, easy to use. It's worth checking out no matter what your objective is. So we are now moving into what is the second week. And here's what's key. So I told you about the ambition shows. So every single Saturday in the month of August, except for one, I'm having on an amazing guest who's going to talk to you about their passion, their purpose, and how they brought that to fruition to help other people. These are actually people to me who are just extremely altruistic at this point of their lives. And I feel they have something that other people need to know about. And I wanted to use my platform beyond just talking about mental health topics, but to give you some real tools and motivation yourself. So if you missed out last week, the first week, the kickoff was Tamar Blue, the CEO of Mental Happy. But don't worry, because you can always go back and watch those. We'll talk about that in a bit as well. But we're going to move on because we have another stellar guest stepping in episode 69. And I am so excited about this because this really resonates with me with being a therapist. There are all types of therapy that are actually out there. And our next guest onto the ambition stage, Julian Bermudez, teacher, guide, and he's a founder of a trauma healing and psychedelic integration type practice that takes you deep into the understanding and the journey of that is trauma. And I'm going to say this, all therapists are not created equal. depending upon what they're treating you for. And I feel it takes really unique people to work with people who have trauma, because trauma, as I say to everyone I've ever worked with, is not one size fits all. You may have something in common with someone, but that doesn't mean that you have a shared experience. You share something in common, but the experience might be different. We let Julian up onto the stage to talk about, and I love his practice mantras. He talks about transforming suffering into agency and liberation. I would look at almost every person I've ever met and ask them, do you ever, in your mind, when you think about the trauma you struggle with, ever see it as agency and liberation? There are two words that people often can't drop into a sentence because they've never had the type of trauma treatment that could help them to discover that. That's exactly what's going on at Psychedelic Integration, which is all about trauma therapy. It's a partnership with Julian, his partner, and his wonderful dog as well. They have this really unique thing that they do. And when I heard about it, when I met with him, but by the way, I meet with every person one-on-one before I bring them on the show to learn about them, what they do, so I can make sure and I do my research. And when I say I was highly impressed because of their practice and their approach, they're about healing beneath the surface. They're into therapy, and this is their words, that honor your mind, body, and soul. And to me, when you're working on trauma, that's what it's all about. So without further ado, let's bring Julian onto the stage to chat about what he does. Let's learn about his journey and what got him to the type of trauma treatment that he does. I see him backstage. I want to bring him on. There he goes. But we have to wait for him to bring his camera on. I'm sure he'll be there in a second. There he is.
Hi, Maya. Thanks for having me.
Of course. We've been looking forward to this particular episode because I obviously come across a lot of people in private practice who have a history of trauma. And I even will say to them at times, I feel the type of work that you need at this point for me in my career goes beyond what I can truly do for you. And I refer out to people that I feel that are like the trauma whisperers, the ones who truly, and I know that sounds like cliche, Julian, but it's true. Everybody does not reach into a person's inner soul and help them come out to be able to truly heal. And I don't think, as just a regular therapist, which I'm not downplaying my role, I just think I've passed people on to other people. So, and having you here, tell us a bit what got you to this point. I know you're from Detroit, so you're our neighbor over to the east from Chicago. But tell us, how did you get into this? Tell us your passion, your purpose, what led you down this path?
Yeah. Trauma whispering, huh? Yeah, that's an interesting paradox or situation. It's like the Buddha said, it's because you suffer and it's because I suffer that we can understand each other. So when I'm working with people very frequently, almost universally, they tell me pretty quickly, wow, I can really see myself in you, and I can see that you really see what I'm going through. And my ability to really see what people are going through and to understand what they're going through and to make sense of it and to help them navigate those spaces are because, well, I came through it too. I'm happy to go into as much of my origins as you'd like. But keep it short. I grew up in a very highly traumatic area, very highly traumatic childhood. I was on my own very early, and I was left with so much pain because of it. And it was just unsustainable. I wasn't going to last too much longer with it. And so I got to this point in my early 20s where I said, that's enough. No more of this. I deserve to know how to live without wanting my life to end. And, I don't want to ask too much, but I would like to be able to enjoy my life as well. And so I really got on this quest to try and figure out how to make that happen. And at one point, I even moved to Chicago. And that's where I did most of my undergraduate, where I was studying clinical psychology and addiction psychology, really trying to figure out addictions primarily. My family, my community, everybody that I was around really struggling with addiction. So I wanted to figure it out. And I got to say, I just was not thrilled or satisfied with the answers I was getting at the university. They were a behaviorist university, so they're looking at it as it's a complex mechanism, addictions as, this interaction between genetics and choice or a disease model. So on the one hand, you're making choices and you deserve to be punished. And that's how you would justify treatment. Or you're diseased and you got the genes for it and you're just SOL, too bad. I didn't really like that. That was so far removed from my own experiences. So I found some incredible teachers through self-study. And that's what led me to find this path, because we were actually coming up with answers for what addictions are. And you can't look at addictions without looking at the pain that's causing the addiction. So that's what really got me into trauma. And once I really started studying trauma and trying to figure out how to transform it, I said, wow, we got some real movement here, some real power here. And of course, that leads into psychedelic therapy and the teachers that I worked with there. And that's how I got to where I'm at now. I moved out to the West Coast because of the atmosphere, the political, and it sounds so strange saying that now because it's changed so much since I've come out here. But their ideas around psychedelic therapy was at the time cutting edge. So that's why I came out here. But that's where I'm at now, and that's what I'm working with. And that's in short how I got here.
Okay. And they always say some of the best people to work with are people who can truly understand, because they may not, like I said, have walked that same path. Like there is no shared trauma. You may have trauma experiences that you can maybe compare, but everybody's experience is different. But I do think that people can appreciate when they can hear that somebody else has struggled or they've hurt, and they can make that connection. So I think that piece is key. One of the things that I like about your therapy is you're really about the idea of drilling deep into people. And to me, when you work on trauma, if you're not getting deep into the surface, there's that school of thought that says that trauma sits at the cellular level. And I legitimately do believe that people hold their pain that deep. But until someone understands that, doing the surface work on trauma doesn't work. And I like when it talks about your self-exploration is kind of how you term this on your website. You talk about that beliefs you inherit or internalize about yourself and what you deserve. You really seems like you start at, to me, it seems like the bottom, and you work with people through it. Tell me a bit about kind of how your approach goes when people decide they want to explore and go on this journey with you.
Yeah. Well, the first things that I start to do is I'm not really interested. We do make time and we do talk about the things that happened, but that's not what the trauma is. That's just the thing that happened to you. The trauma is what happens inside of you as a result to the thing that happened. So on a physical level, you get a concussion, you get hit in the head. Getting a hit in the head is what happened. And then the concussion is the trauma that happens afterwards. So yeah, there's no shared trauma. Everybody experiences situations differently. And on the other hand, there are very familiar and consistent adaptations to trauma. The most common one is that we become disconnected from ourselves. So trauma, again, is what happens. Something happens to you, and it can be bad things that happen that shouldn't happen. Death of a parent, illness, addictions, so on and so forth, incarceration, physical abuse, mental, sexual, emotional abuse, all those things. But it can also be good things that are supposed to happen that don't happen. So you might have very loving parents, and you might have very caring parents who are invested in your life. And they cared so much about you that they consulted the experts when you were a baby, and the experts told them, don't hold your child when they're crying. Let them learn to self-soothe, let them learn to regulate. And so this fundamental need that we had as babies for connections went unnoticed. And all of these emotions that are crying out, trying to get the connection, get dampened. So when we're going through these hardships, these painful experiences, when it becomes traumatic is when we don't have the resources to navigate it. So if we can't make the pain stop as a baby, if you can't, you're crying out and you can't get the connection that you want, and you can't go away physically to make the pain stop, every one of us has this wonderful built-in mechanism, a survival mechanism, where we go away mentally. We disconnect from our emotions, we disconnect from our feelings, and we check out and we go to this mental world where we can actually disconnect from the pain that we're in. That's the hallmark of trauma right there, is this disconnection. So when I start working with people, is I want to figure out immediately where are they disconnected at, and what is their relationship, their inner state, their inner being? What is the temperature, the climate like in their inner experience that they're trying to disconnect from? So what is their relationship to themselves? Once we start to figure those two things out, that gives us so many things to work with, so many areas where we can start to build awareness of how we're disconnected and how we disconnect from ourselves through various adaptations like addictions. We can start to feel uncomfortable, so we get sucked into our phone and we scroll for an hour, and that gives us the disconnect. Or we might use substances like alcohol or drugs, or we might be invested into work or status and power and wealth. How do these things serve us? What are they providing for us? And can we meet those unmet needs in more constructive ways? These are the things that I really started looking at, within the first 15 minutes of working with somebody.
Wow. And that's a lot to unpack. And I feel like what I hear resonating in your conversation is helping people to understand the emotional patterns.
Yeah.
Those are usually the fallout of what the trauma has created. And you're right. One of the things that in working with people in trauma that frequently they will focus on is the event itself.
Mm-hmm.
Not and maybe loosely the emotion, but it's always more about the event, the people that were involved in the event,
Mm-hmm.
versus the real emotion that it keeps moving forward past the event. So it's interesting that you talk about identifying that pain and the disconnection, because I feel when people do a lot of trauma work, those are things that they don't tend to want to address. They want to stay focused on the moment and not the outcome of what has happened to them because of the moment.
Precisely. It's a defense, because in the moment of what we experience, there's pain. And so then you can see the defense mechanism, the disconnecting from it, and we get into the mental world and we start ruminating and dwelling and going round and round and round in this mental realm over here, telling the story over and over again. And we have these intrusive memories that keep coming in, kicking in, and we keep experiencing it over and over and over again. We're experiencing it to allow us to process it, but we have this defense that's right there. And we keep getting stuck in the dwelling and ruminating and telling the stories over. And from what I experience is it's like a snowball. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes down the hill. I don't know, maybe you see that too with the clients you work with, is we just keep going around, and it's very difficult. It can be very challenging to get through that defense.
What's interesting in the people that I have worked with in trauma, and eventually that I will refer out, it gets to the point where I feel like you're right. It's a snowball, but in the same context, it's like a snowball that never stops.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we could have a moment that feels like a breakthrough. Like we've identified some emotions. We're working on self-compassion and forgiveness and all these things. And then just like that, they go back to the memory.
Mm-hmm.
And then the anger resurfaces. And as we know, anger is just the emotion that masks what's really under the surface. The frustration, the disappointment, the hurt, the abandonment. That's what anger is. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. But I find that people will go back to the moment, and all they work on the discovery of themselves does not seem to hold the same value to them as that moment. Or especially, and this will be interesting if you tell me in working with like trauma, let's say that's maybe family based, which is a lot of times people will still have connections. That can be hard. So if it's family based, or let's say it's in a romantic situation with a partner, or it depends on what it is, how people can't seem to break themselves away from the experience to be able to move forward and to heal, not grow, because you can't grow until you heal.
Yeah. The trauma almost always takes root early in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
If we grow up in a very nurturing, attuned, connected environment where our needs are met, where we have secure, safe attachments, where we are valued and accepted exactly as we are. We don't have to work to maintain the relationships. There's nothing that we can do that would ruin the relationship. When we experience hardship, it's not traumatic because we have all the resources that we need to go through those painful areas. On the other hand, when we don't have those things and our relationship is dependent on us being cute or agreeable or compliant or suppressing our emotions to maintain our relationships, that's what we do, is we learn to disconnect from our emotions. So the trauma almost always. I've never seen an example where it does not form early in life for those exact reasons. So it's like a river. And this river's been flowing. This pattern has been deeply entrenched in us from the beginning, during the time when our bodies were developing, when our nervous system was developing, when our emotional circuits are developing, when our worldview and the way that we process information is all developing. It's developing in relationship to this trauma and the way that we're adapting to it. And one of the most common ways that we adapt to that trauma is what I was just talking about a moment ago. We have these two fundamental needs: attachment, secure attachment. As children, we can't survive without it. We're dependent. We are immature and undeveloped for the longest amount of time than any other species in this world. We can't survive without our attachments. And then we also have the need to feel our emotions, the whole range of emotional spectrum, and to be able to express it and to communicate and to be present and attuned with it and have other people be attuned with it. But if those two things are in conflict, if when I get angry, I get put in a timeout and my parents say, you go to your room until you can learn to regulate and suppress your emotions, and then you can come back. In other words, they're going to threaten me with the attachment thing that's most important to me. I learn that one of these two has to go. And so it's almost always the authenticity, the expression, the feeling of the emotion. This is that disconnect that I was talking about. That's what we sacrifice to maintain our attachments. So then we become people pleasers. We go out of our way to make people happy. We become agreeable. We make ourselves small, and we do everything we can to maintain our attachments because that's what we learn very early in life. Or we go the other way and we make ourselves big and grandiose, and we go out in the world and we accumulate all the status and all the wealth and all the power and prestige and the respect. And we go and we get those other people before they can get us. And if we do that, if we become grandiose enough and we attack enough people before they can attack us, well, we get to become the president of the United States. We get to rise to the highest powers of corporate and political powers in this society, and we're glorified for it. So when we see these people who are struggling with these deeply entrenched patterns and they can't quite get out of it, and they might have the breakthrough and then they go right back into it, that river's flowing so deeply, and the energy, the water flows through it so quickly and so easily. And it takes a great deal of effort and persistence and patience to constantly channel that water to somewhere else. And so when I'm talking about agency, choice, responsibility, and liberation, that's exactly what we're talking about, is being aware of this pattern, being aware of where it developed, being aware of how it shows up in our lives, and constantly taking responsibility for it and saying, I'm going to choose something different. And luckily, we've got lots of tools to help people do that.
That is good to hear, because that agency piece you talk about is probably one of the biggest struggles. I feel that a person can have that breakthrough, but they will always seem to revert back to this need for validation or affirmation from someone, especially if it's about those attachment pieces. I always say that family dynamics are probably the most complicated ones to work with people because of that very fact, attachment. The need to feel loved and accepted. I mean, we want that from our family. So whenever there's a rift, it's often hard for people to navigate that. And I always say, the hardest part about truly healing is you have to make the decision that you are choosing you. You are going to put yourself first. And if you've grown accustomed to being a people pleaser, it's really hard for people to break that cycle and say, I am worthy of love. I am good enough. Every human makes a mistake. Every human is going to make a bad choice. That does not we are. Those are only moments that are meant to help you grow. So how can you work with someone who, I would say, self-worth is so important. It's entirely different than self-esteem, and people have to learn the difference between the two. But when you have a person who is so deeply wounded and their self-worth is so low, how do you begin to kind of help them to be able to see themselves? Because I always say to people, even if it's with addiction, who you are in the midst of addiction or whatever the case may be, that's not who you are. You have to be able to step back and see yourself in the totality of, you are a full person that might make a mistake. You may do something that you're not proud of, but that does not define you. How do you help people begin to understand the idea of authenticity and defining themselves outside of maybe what they've come accustomed to thinking is the norm.
Yeah. Yeah, this is, yeah, you're really getting straight to it there.
Oh, sorry.
What's that?
I didn't mean to jump right to it, but
Oh,
I
no,
figured,
yeah, it's great. Yeah, very good. This belief of unworthiness it's one of the most important pieces of this puzzle. And I start from the core belief myself. My practice is based on the fundamental premise that every single person has the wisdom that knows how to heal,
Mhm.
the ability to be whole and to reconnect with all of that wisdom and to be authentically you. It's still inside of you. So when somebody's in when they're healing an addiction, we oftentimes say that they're in recovery, and the word recover means that you find something that you've lost. So what is
Mhm.
it that somebody recovers, that they find that they've lost when they're healing an addiction? Well, it's their self, it's the wisdom, the wholeness that's inside of them. It's who they were before all the pain happened. And that's what we're trying to recover. That's what we're trying to get to. So this belief of unworthiness that we're talking about, the I'm not good enough, I'm not deserving, I'm not capable of being loved. This is an adaptation to trauma in itself, and it's another form of that disconnection. So again, we go back to the early years, early childhood. Bad things are happening that shouldn't, or the good things that are supposed to happen, they're not happening. How do I make sense of that as a child? There's really only two ways that I can look at it. I can say first, my caregivers, my family, my loved ones, my teachers, whoever's there who's taking care of me, they're not up to the job. They're not qualified. They're not capable. They're not willing. Whatever it is, they're not doing it. In other words, I'm not safe. So basically, I'm screwed. Well, there's not a lot of room to engage with that and to get through it. It's not exactly hopeful. So that's where the second view comes in, which is my family, my parents, my caregivers, my teachers, whoever, they do know what's going on. They got an idea. They're older. They have relationships. They are surviving in the world. They have resources. They know what's going on. The problem is I'm not worthy of getting the things that I need. So if I could be worthy, if I could be good enough, if I could do the things that I need, then I will get the love and the care and the connection and the attachment and all the things that I need that I'm not getting. So now we can see I become a people pleaser, or I go out and I try and do all the things that I need to do. In other words, we could ask, yes, we can look at and say, I want my family to value me and respect me. But who's the real person who doesn't value, love, or respect me? Well, it's myself, because I have a belief that I'm not lovable, or I'm unworthy, or I'm not deserving. And again, that's the adaptation. It saved me in the short term. It gave me a sense of hope. It gave me a path to get through a very difficult time. It really helps me in the short term, which is what an addiction is. An addiction provides short-term relief, so we can't let go of it. We keep coming back to it, and it has long-term consequences. And despite those long-term consequences, we can't give it up because it's providing something for us. So here, this belief of unworthiness is providing something for us. It's helping us back in the past. And what we need to learn how to do is to cultivate that self-compassion, to learn how to not want somebody to come and give me the things that I'm looking for. Because if I'm always looking for somebody to come and save me, to come and give me the love or the acceptance that I need, that means that I'm a victim. And if I'm a victim, I don't have any power. I'm powerless. I'm hopeless. I'm always waiting. I'm at the whim of somebody else. But if I can learn to cultivate that love and that respect and that connection that I was really looking for that I didn't get at that point in my life, if I can learn to cultivate that and give it to myself, well, now I become very powerful. And now I'm not dependent on what my family does or their behaviors. And sure, they can do things that are very hurtful, but I can set boundaries and I can say, I'm not going to be treated that way because I don't deserve to be treated that way. And if I'm going to be treated that way, then I can cultivate space or I can do whatever I need to do to take care of myself. So the way that we start to look at this belief is, one, the belief of unworthiness, is we look at where does it come from? What purpose does it serve? what needs are underneath this belief. And rather than trying to be really harsh and critical of ourselves and judging and evaluating ourselves, which is that same familiar pattern, let's try to be a little bit kinder. And we can look at this belief, this pattern as one of my teachers calls it the stupid friend. It's the friend that's always there, super loyal, been with you since the beginning. You can call them anytime and they're right there. Most times you don't even have to call them because they already know what's going on and they're ready to help you out. And they're danger prone, right? You don't want them driving the car because when they get involved, things go wrong. So this belief, it's that stupid friend. They care. They're so compassionate. They're so loyal. They're dedicated. And you don't want them taking the keys and getting behind the wheel when you're in the car. So what we try to do is we try to be kind to ourselves and we look at, well, when this belief originated, what were the things that I needed? And usually it's very consistent because, I mean, there's fundamental human needs. I needed somebody to be with me. I needed somebody to see me. I needed somebody to listen and try and understand me. I needed some validation, some affirmation saying, of course, yeah, of course you feel these things. Of course you're angry. Who wouldn't be angry in this situation? Of course you're sad. Of course you're scared. Of course you're ashamed. That all has reason and purpose that's there. I need to see those emotions and be with them, and I need to try to accept them and then offer some comfort and some care to those, and to do so consistently. And if I can start to do those things, when this belief kicks in and when all these emotions and this pattern gets activated, I recognize it's there and I make the choice, I'm going to start to nurture myself in these ways with the things that I really needed, then I'm not so dependent on other people. And this is where I can really start to liberate myself from needing those types of relationships. Because when we're older, we almost always will look for people to give us the love and the connection, the compassion that we didn't get. And because we learned that love and compassion looks like this from our parents, the ways that we don't get it is we look for people who can't give it to us. So we keep finding ourselves in those exact same patterns. But if I can start to give it to myself and I can start to build the capacity to do those things myself and I practice it daily, then my dependence on getting it from other people, especially people who can't give it to me, falls off.
And that's the piece right there I think people struggle with when it comes to just healing in general, is the healing comes from within, not from the outside.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when they're trying to heal, they're looking for someone from the outside to save them, to be the person that changes the tide. And when you say to them, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, you are the change agent. You are the person that's going to make this happen. It does not mean that you won't have support and people who are supportive and all those things, but the real change begins with you, and it starts with forgiveness. And forgiveness is something I find across the board for people. But one of the things that when I work with people, I'll say is, one of the hardest things to accept, but it does become an eye-opening moment, is when you realize that often, like if you talk about parents, whatever the case may be, is people only love you the way they know how.
Yeah.
And the problem with that often can be, it may not be what you need. And at a time, they may not know that. They may assume that what they're doing is okay because, let's be honest, there's no feedback, especially if you're a child, right? There's no feedback. You go with what you're given. And the minute you step back and look at the entirety of the picture, the forest for the trees thing, and say, I might have to be forgiving for the fact that I didn't get this. And everybody walks that moment. I had to have the aha moment at 53, literally at 53. It dawned on me that my parents were not exactly the parents that I wanted.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't realize I had pretty much young parents. They were 19 and 20.
Yeah.
But I never saw them in that way because I grew up still getting things I needed and I was taken care of, and I never looked at their age.
Yeah.
But when I sat down and had independent conversations with them, I was like, oh my God, you were only 20. I'm going to have to forgive you for some of your decision making because you were probably listening to other people telling you what to do. You had never been a parent before. And that's where the forgiveness came for me. So I say sometimes you have to look at people's circumstances. And if the best they had to give wasn't enough, it just wasn't enough. But here's the thing. As an adult, you become the architect of your present and your future. You don't have to carry those values forward with you or those morals forward with you anymore. You get to be anything that you want to be starting right now. So the choice is yours. What are you going to do with it? And that, for some reason, for some people, they step back and go, It's a scary proposition, isn't it? That you now are the decision maker,
Yeah.
not somebody else.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on having that aha moment there. That's
At
very
53.
important. Yeah.
At 53.
And
Think
I
about it.
mean, we don't need to judge it, right? I mean, you had the moment, so that's amazing. Yeah, my parents were around the same age too. And when we're hurt, when we have this pain that we're carrying around, anger comes up. And anger is an emotion that likes to blame. It likes to say, well, I'm feeling this way and it's your fault. And blame, it's not exactly conducive to any of the outcomes that we're looking for, because this pain that we're talking about, it flows through the generations. Our parents carried that exact same pain. If they're loving us in the capacity that they know how to love us, that means that somebody taught them these exact same patterns. That means that the exact same needs that we have that went unmet for them as well. And so they do the best they can. They do everything that they can. They try their hardest. We can take that for granted. We are biologically programmed to care for our young. So we can take it for granted that they tried their best, and their best could have been a whole lot better. But blaming them doesn't exactly help us, because that exact same pain and those patterns are inside of us. So if we blame them, again, we're one, making ourselves a victim, but then two, we're blaming ourselves. We're evaluating and judging, criticizing and punishing ourselves for those exact same things. These patterns, we can't even find the origin of them. Our parents had them, their parents had them, their parents had them. It's intergenerational trauma. It just flows through the generations and it comes to us. And yeah, this is where we can start to take some responsibility and say, wow, these were people who were in terrible pain themselves. And that pain flows through them. And this is where I'm going to start to take responsibility for it. I'm going to start to do something with it. And I'm not going to let it flow through me onto other people.
And that's the piece that I think it's so important, is when you have that moment, like your own aha moment, that you know something, and a lot of it is generational trauma.
Yeah.
Forward, or someone thinks that's the way you're supposed to do things, and it's not necessarily right. So it's good when people have that moment and they can get to the point of forgiveness with others, but more importantly, themselves.
Yeah.
We're all bound to make mistakes. And I love when people can find their voice.
Yeah.
And when you find your voice, that becomes the path to taking back the power that you often willingly gave up and didn't even know that you did.
Yeah, it's not exactly a choice or willing. I mean, it's more like it's the adaptation. Usually the only thing that we have that's available to us. And recultivating our power and using our voice and recultivating and connecting with our authenticity is very scary. It's going to feel so threatening when we do that, because if we would have done that when we were younger, it would have caused terrible consequences. If we would have expressed our emotions, we would have been told, well, if you're going to be angry, I'll give you something to be mad about. Or if you're going to be sad, I'll give you something to cry about. Or, so many things would have happened. So I think everybody can kind of relate with, oh yeah, I've had to suppress my emotions and bad things would have happened. So when I start to express my boundaries and I start to communicate my emotions and I say, M.A.Y.A, what you just said really hurt me and I don't like that. It's so painful. Now what I'm tapping into is what one of my teachers calls the compassion of truth, which means that as I start to reclaim my authenticity, I start to tap into my expression, I start to reclaim my power, my empowerment to take care of myself, is the relationships that have been based on, and in many cases have benefited from, my lack of boundaries or my lack of expression. Those relationships are going to become very stressed and very challenged. And I'm going to have to make a lot of choices on what I do with that. And ideally, the people around me can respect that and grow with me, but that's not always the case. So a lot of the times when we start to look at these patterns that we have and these adaptations, whether it's through the expression of boundaries, the expression of our emotions, or just starting to come to the acceptance of what has happened, the first thing is there's usually a lot of pain that's underneath it. And this pain is quite contrary to the pattern of the adaptation that we have that gives us short-term relief but long-term harm.
Mm-hmm.
This compassion of truth, when we start to look at these dynamics and we start to face this pain and we start to face these patterns, it has short-term pain that can be fairly intense and is something that we usually really want to avoid. But when we can really go into it and engage with it and start to process and soothe it, is it's intense and it's a short-term pain, is it passes, and it usually passes very quickly. And there's long-term relief, long-term joy, long-term expansion, long-term peace that we start to find from that. So the pattern reverses. Instead of having the short-term relief and long-term harm, now we have the short-term discomfort. Yes, my relationships might be challenged. Yes, I might feel this incredible sense of threat and panic and danger when I start to express myself. And that is a short-term pain. It might be very intense, but it will lead to long-term relief.
There you go. So I know people are watching and they're going to say, okay, I'm interested in this. I feel like this is probably something that I could use to help me to maybe unpack my trauma. That, I'll be honest, people are like, I've been in therapy for 15 years. Huh? Okay. What have we not, I'm honest, like, what have we not gotten to here? Not with me necessarily, but when people have told me they've been in therapy for years, but yet they're still holding deeply onto this trauma or this pain. I'm like, mind you, you get to therapy at different junctures in life. You work with different people, so I get it. But I was like, but it's really time to be honest with yourself to unpack this so that you can live the life you want. So I know probably saying, well, this sounds like I want to do this, but one, he mentioned he's not around here locally. So one, how could I get involved? How can I make this happen for me? Because there's usually a very structured system, with healthcare, how that works. So there are people who would probably totally want to explore this, but they're like not sure if they can, or what should they do if they want to get in contact with you and pursue this?
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned a really important piece too there, which is I work with people all the time. I've been in therapy for 15, 20, 30, 40 years, and I've had no relief. And then 5-10 minutes into the first call with me, they're like, whoa, hold on. I've never gotten to this before. So many therapists just don't have the tools and the resources, and they're trained in ways that just re-perpetuate and keep those patterns going for lots of reasons. We don't need to get into it. I think everybody kind of has an idea of that already. So yeah, working with the right people is very important. If you want to reach out and you want some support from me, my website's great. I work with people remotely all the time. That's the main thing right there. So we can do video chats just like this. It doesn't matter where you're at. We can reach you. I do 1.5-hour sessions. We go by the sessions. You can try one out with me for next to no commitment. You try out the first 1.5-hour session. If it's not for you for whatever reason, I don't charge, because I don't want people to be financially obligated for these things. I don't want them to say, oh, I'm already invested in it now, I might as well keep going with it. And yeah, come and see what it's like. And we're starting up some support groups as well. Doing live events on the 3rd Friday of every month. So you can log in and we'll do something very similar to this right here. Ask questions, see what you want to come and talk about, and we'll address it. And actually, I got to connect through you with Tamar, who you talked about beforehand. And she has a wonderful platform there. So I'm starting up a couple groups on there as well. And those will be on alternating Fridays as well. So all this information's on my website. And if anybody's interested, we're putting lots of resources to reach more people out there.
And I noticed, like I said, I did my research, and I noticed, kind of you're out there from a social media standpoint. So I noticed, but what was nice is when I saw your Instagram and even YouTube, you've got some videos and things out there, and reels. So if people kind of want to get a feel, hear, listen, what I'm saying, they can like do the lead work and kind of see the stuff you're talking about. And again, and to be like, okay, I've never heard it from this perspective. I've never heard someone talk to me like this. And, the whole thing, like one of the things for me that started to shift in my practice is that I will never tell anybody I'm a Buddhist, because I don't think I've earned the right to say that. I'm not consistent enough. But I love the practice of Buddhism as a philosophy that has so much depth to it that can be so explored. And I think when people open their minds to different things, and that's why I want them to open their mind. You could have been in therapy for 10 or 15 years. I guarantee you, Julian, you're going to say something to them they've never heard before. That is just that light bulb moment. And it's okay. maybe that 15 years got them to this point to be able to hear, because it's a journey. I mean, no one is, I always say to people, if it took you 50 years to get to this point and feel broken, we don't fix it in 6 months to a year. It was a lifetime that brought you to your knees. To help you stand back up, it doesn't happen overnight. And I think patience is a big part of therapy and healing that people need to understand. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. Yeah. I see people make quick transformations where they can start to build a practice that will allow them to change the way that they're living their lives. And that can happen very quickly. And they can make tremendous gains very quickly. And then we spend a lot of our life, the rest of our life, trying to continually nurture and develop and mature this practice. And whether we call ourselves Buddhists or not, I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh, the world-renowned famous Buddhist, he calls himself a part-time Buddhist because it's an art of recovering the practice and then forgetting it again. And there's lots of times where we don't do it, and we don't need to judge ourselves for that. We just keep doing the best that we can. So yeah, I see people make very quick transformations, and there's no magic pills. There's no magic bullets. We empower ourselves to make the changes, and we're the ones that have to do it. I mean, there's a great title of a book from Richard Schwartz. You can read the book. It's great. But the title is right around what we're talking about here. It's called "You're the One You've Been Looking For."
Oh.
We're the ones who come and save ourselves.
And that piece right there, I think I spend more time saying that to people in therapy, like, no one's coming to save you, it's you. Which is a good place to be to start the whole process. Like, I love when people talk about mindfulness, though I do feel like it's unfortunately like just one of those words that's thrown around too loosely. I was like, if you're not doing it every day, you're not being mindful, because change is predicated on the behavior. It's about discipline and consistency. And if you want in your life, then those are things you have to do. Whether it's, I'm working on my mental health, I want to lose weight, I want to lower, my A1C, whatever it is. It's about discipline and consistency. And that equally applies when it comes to your mental health. If you're only going to apply the work when you feel like you're in crisis or struggling, then you're doing yourself a disservice, is what I tell people. You want to do the work when you feel like you're in a better space, so you can have greater clarity and you can continue to build along the way.
That's right.
Any nuggets, anything that we didn't talk about before we let you go? This has been amazing and fantastic. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. We were talking about these deeply entrenched patterns and how quickly the energy, the water flows through it. And, we're out here channeling, with a spade shovel, trying to create new trenches for energy to flow. And we have lots of incredible tools that can really help to make new patterns very quickly.
Nice.
One of the most common things in the psychedelic literature is that psychedelic experiences create neuroplasticity, meaning that they grow new neural connections very quickly. So when we start to pair this work that we're doing right here with these types of psychedelic experiences, is we really have the ability to increase our awareness very quickly and to write new patterns very quickly. And these are wonderful ways to help soften all those defenses and to take that conditioned mind, that way of processing information, those perspectives, those worldviews about ourselves, about the world, about others, and we can start to set those down and experience and create something new. And we can do that very quickly. Of course, we will have to continue the practice and develop and mature it over time. But through this approach and with these tools and resources, we have the ability to, yes, make significant changes very quickly. And I see it happen very frequently.
Very nice. Well, here's the thing. I'd like to put the call of action to everybody out there. If you're struggling, that's trauma-based. If you know someone, I always say, just because you heard this today doesn't mean it's for you. It might be for somebody else that you know that is struggling, that could use something else to help them kind of get through this journey that they're struggling and they feel they're walking alone. So even if this is not for you, please pass this information on to someone else so that they may be able to step forward and get the help they need. Or, because you have to challenge yourself in this, because if you really want to get better, it's about courage, but it's also about challenge. And I know that's the one piece that can be hard and very fearful, is the idea of the unknown. Where do I go from here? Am I going to be okay? And one of the people, when you kind of sit down and have therapy with them, I will tell people, you're going to have moments when you're not okay. It's going to hurt. We're going to have to feel the pain in order to be able to heal. There is no to be able to get to where we want to go. So I need you to be open to the idea of you're going to have to say some things. And even here's the big part. There might be some that you might have to be accountable for. People struggle with that. You know, it's interesting. So as you're unpacking these things, we understand, okay, this part is here, but what about this part right here? So it'll be interesting. I definitely hope people reach out. As people know at this point, I didn't do my whole housekeeping I normally do when I start the show because I wanted to get right to you. I wanted to spend all this time talking to you. I'm like, I'll get to my housekeeping stuff at the end, and people will know where to find me. But beyond that, I like the fact that you're willing to do consultations with people. It's kind of like no risk. It's like that within itself. You have the opportunity to speak to someone, and there's no risk for you to even do it. Yep. And to say, okay, I feel like this is something I want to explore. Doing the support groups, which means now you can reach even more people. This is fantastic. So I'm glad to hear that you're going to be expanding and even using Mental Happy. That's nice.
Yeah. Thank you for all those connections too. I really appreciate that. And yeah,
and I'm
free consultations. And like I said, you do that, we can do the 1.5-hour session after that too. And if you don't like it for whatever reason, if it's not for you, then there's no charge.
Okay. I'm gonna say this again. It doesn't get better than that. Somebody is giving you an open invitation to start the journey and not overcommit just to make sure you feel okay about it. You can't beat that. So I would encourage everybody. That's a call to action. Try it out. This is about your happiness and your future. And if you don't want your present is exactly what it is until you decide to move to the past and let your future exist. So here's an opportunity for people to really, if you've struggled to let something go, here's a chance to try something new and see what happens. So Julian, thank you for coming on, Maya. I appreciate it. I do anticipate somehow you're going to hear from people. I have this sinking suspicion I might push it more, but yes.
Thank you. I really appreciate your support here. I really appreciate this time.
You're going to be so busy. You might call me and say, Maya, can you please stop sending people to me?
Yeah, that would be a blessing. I would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd love the day you call me and say, no more people, Maya. No more people. All right. Well, thank you. And, somewhere down the road, would love to have you on again and talk about something else. Who knows? There's always space here on Maya to bring in salient conversations with people. And, anything you ever want to share, would love to have you back on the show again.
Wonderful. Yes. Let's please stay connected.
All right. Have a good one, Julian. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, that was Julian Bermudez, who is a teacher, guide, and founder of Trauma Healing and Psychedelic Integration. I love this outside the box. I really do. As he said, you can go to their website right here on the screen. It's psychedelic-integration.net. Everything there. So if you want to learn, research, I always tell people research and learn. You can go there. You can also get social with Julian as well, because they have an Instagram and YouTube, and a lot of his videos and things are on there. So you can see what he's talking about. It's all good stuff. I love the fact now that he's actually going to be doing support groups, because now it's one thing I feel about support groups is that some people love them, some people hate them. But the thing that I've noticed is that when people can sit in that circle with people and understand they don't stand alone in how they feel, it somehow makes them, it's liberating to them. Like, wow. And they sometimes know it, but to hear someone else say, I get that. I feel that pain too. I often feel small that way. It seems to be able to help people build themselves out, because there's something about human connection that you can never, ever say, does it matter? When you feel connected to people, you tend to thrive. And in part of life, I don't want people who watch Maya just to be in survival mode. I want you to grow and I want you to thrive, because you have your whole life ahead of you. Now, with that being said, I am super excited. You have to tune in. We are off next week. So a couple of these episodes are going to re-air next Saturday that you might have missed, with Tamar and Julian will re-air. But then on August 23rd at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, we're going to have on our next guest, Thomas LaGrave Jr. And I am super excited about this, because legitimately, this to me is everything really kind of full circle. He is a former corpsman and the U.S. Navy SEAL. He is an author. He is a licensed clinical social worker. His current book, which is Special Welfare, Social Warfare, is about systematic injustice, poverty, and social neglect. And the thing that Thomas is talking about, he is really focused on younger people. And when I talked to him, I love the fact that he flat out said, you know, Maya, here's the thing. He has dedicated almost all of his life to actually at one point focusing on young men. He had something called the Honor Bond Academy that he ran for like years that brought in young men and helped them with their psychological and emotional development. And they stayed at this location that was in California, Sonoma, I think it was. And he eventually said he needed to take my message broader. So he became an author and wrote books. But he flat out said to me, Maya, we are failing our young people. We are not giving them the tools that they need to be successful. That's why I love when I have my younger individuals in therapy, people in their under 30s, because they realize I struggled with something and I say, I am happy that you're here because the demons that maybe your parents battled, probably still are battling, you are here to slay them and to live a life that is worthy of you. And you don't have to carry forward all of these generational narratives, morals, and values that may not align with who you are. So when he said it, I kind of giggled. I said, you know, Thomas, I tend to find that my least group I don't like working with most of the time are adolescents, kids, yet like me, which I think is funny. They're like, oh my, I'm like, really? But I end up enjoying working with him for some bizarre reason. But when he said that, I'm like, I can't wait to have him on. And if you're a young person, if you have a young adult in college or just someone between 20 to 30, you need to tell them to tune in because he's going to share some things, especially about young men. I feel men are always overlooked, especially when it comes to mental health. They have the highest rate of suicide. They often struggle with depression. Pass them over and tell them to suck it up and not have emotions. When you hear Thomas LeGrave Jr.'s story, I think you will be so motivated and you'll love the ambition shows even more. So make sure you tune in for our next guest. So with that being said, remember, if you've missed any episode of Maya, you can find it in the iTunes store, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio Podcast, Amazon, Audibles, and Spotify, those platforms. Just search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Of course, you can always just find everything Maya on my website, which is www.maya-speaks.com. It's all things Maya. You can click on the podcast and click on the podcast links, and it'll take you to the podcast platform you prefer. I also have two things on there that I really am proud of. I do have the inspirational log that's on there. I only post one thing a week about inspiration because some people do daily. Thought I want you for the whole week and really think about it and internalize it. So I give you one inspiration for the week that I really want you to deconstruct and process. And then I have the Me on Pause, which is the Maya Menopause blog, and I tackle all kinds of topics that are related to perimenopause and menopause. The last post was actually about ADHD and menopause. A lot of women don't even get there's a connection and how menopause can be so disruptive for women when they have ADHD. So that's the current post. Something is coming up for Monday, so there'll be a new post. So make sure you check out those blogs. They are totally filled with information. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening to this episode, The Ambition Show. It was a great show. Thank you to Julian for coming on. You know, the whole purpose of this podcast is to help you identify your ambition and harness that motivation to help you to acquire success and that you are seeking in your life. That's what it's about. And you share my YouTube channel. It's both Facebook and YouTube. And if you happen to be a grammar or you like X, you can find me at Maya_Akai. That's AKAI if you're a social media person. So that's it for this episode. I will see everybody in 2 weeks. But remember, next week, I'm going to re-air a bunch of stuff that's already been broadcast so you can catch up. So when we get back on air on the 23rd, you will be set and actually ready to go. All right, everybody, that's it for this time. But wait, before I go, I have someone special. I know it. I'm watching her backstage. She was hoping I wasn't going to do it. I have to bring onto the stage my associate producer, Riley. I was watching her in the background. She's like, okay, yeah. She's going to go. Hi, Riley. You're muted. Turn off so everybody can hear you. Riley is my associate producer. Yes. So tell them a bit about you coming on board, what you'll be doing with Maya.
All right. Hi, I'm Riley. I'm just here for like all the behind the scenes. I do all the little banners that you see, and I just push the right button at the right time. And if I don't, I try my best. So yeah, that's all I'm really here for.
Yeah, don't worry. She'll be doing more. She's actually highly creative. So she could be doing tendencies to the program. So when I start saying old people stuff, she can tell me I'm saying old people stuff and be like, Maya, come forward with us younger people, which I enjoy because I do feel that conversation, everybody needs to be involved. So happy to have Riley on board. You will be seeing more of her. So thank you, Riley.
Yes.
All right, everybody. Well, that's it for this episode. I will see you in 2 weeks, but make sure you tune in next week for this episode. The episode 4 is going to be a lot of catching up, and you'll have time to do it. All right, everybody. That's it this time. Ciao. See you in 2 weeks.
Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.